Hello. Welcome to L Space. My name is Tristan. And I'm doing my last reading wrap up for the last week of June, the last week of Pride Month. It's always a little sad when June ends. It's definitely one of my favorite months where the heat hasn't fully set in for the summer and just I feel very festive. Generally, there's a lot of fun stuff going on. And yeah, June is just great. I love June. Um, so I'm very sad to see it go. Of course, I am a huge celebrant of Pride Month, and I'm sad to see it go every year, and it always feels very sad to have to wait a whole other year for it to come back around. But I am still going to power through. Still going to do my reading wrap up. I ended up reading quite a few books. I did not finish one of them, being this one here. But yeah, I had a pretty good reading month overall. I had no misses whatsoever. And I ended up also finishing a single audiobook, which, again, I've kind of talked about how my audiobook consumption has significantly decreased with my lack of commute to work, because I live a 5-minute walk away from where I work, which is great in and of itself, but at the same time, I'm not spending the time on the bus where I would usually listen to audiobooks. So that's a little bittersweet. But I took a few bike rides this month and just listened to some audiobooks while doing that. And I ended up doing one that was so good. And yeah, I'm very excited to talk about that one. So this weekly wrap up is also going to kind of function as my June reading wrap up, because I've kind of already talked about all of these books, and I don't really want to bore you with a lot of repetition, so we're just kind of get into it and do the thing. Also, I have a new chair, which is fun. Found it on the roadside, and it's mine now. So this will be where I film from now on, which is cool. Probably play with camera angles a little bit and figure out exactly how this is all going to look in the future, but for now, I'm enjoying it. It's also a nice reading chair. I've got my light up here that is very nice. It's very comfortable. It's good for my back as well, because I find on the sofa I slouch a little bit too much, and that's just not good for anyone. Okay, so enough chatting. Let's get to the books, shall we? So this week I finished 3 books. I finished 2 physical books and 1 audiobook, and the audiobook is one that I'm very excited about. So the first book was one that I talked about in my reading wrap up. I think it was last week. But it was Vulgar and It Was Beautiful by Jack Lowery, and this is how AIDS activists used art to fight a pandemic. And I have mentioned this before, that I have generally been trying to kind of reconnect with the AIDS epidemic in the United States and the sort of activism and the experience of living through that period. I think that a lot of queer people, and specifically gay men these days, at least my age and younger, are sort of disconnected from this particular period in a lot of ways, because that's a whole age group of people that has really just disappeared. Here come the cats. So I am trying to reconnect with this piece of my history, my community's history, and myself being very into art and using art as a form of activism in general. This book really struck a chord. My boyfriend and partner, he was the one that actually got this for me at City Lights Books, which is in San Francisco. That's the kitten scampering away. Anyway, so yeah, this highlights the efforts primarily of the group called Grand Fury, which was a sort of separate group out of the ACT UP movement, an ACT UP organization, and they were the ones in charge of basically just like the visuals of the movement. And so I definitely showed them in a previous video, and I'll post them here again, but they were responsible for things like silence equals death, kissing doesn't kill, read my lips. Those images are all devised by Grand Fury, and it was just like a 10 member group at its largest, I believe, and it primarily was comprised of, you know, upper middle class to higher class white gay men, but there were also a couple of Jewish men and one person of color in there, Robert Vasquez Pacheco. He's kind of the token one. But anyway, so it tells their story, how they came up with the designs, how they came up with how they ended up like printing them and posting them around New York City, and all the demonstrations, how effective each one of their posters and pieces of art were, as well as the like museum commissions that they did. They had one called Let the Record Show, which was modeled after the Holocaust, the post-Holocaust trials of, I think it's the Nuremberg trials. Is that right? Editing Tristan will confirm. But yeah, so it models after where they're putting all of the former Nazis on trial for their crimes against humanity, and so they format it in the same way, and they do it with like the head of the FDA, the head of the CDC, and then of course the devil himself, Ronald Reagan. But yeah, this is a fascinating book. It's very well balanced as well. So while the AIDS crisis typically is associated a lot with gay men, white gay men, we'll say, this book gives a lot of space for all of the women, as well as the trans women that were a part of this movement, as well as the numerous people of color who are involved in the movement, as well as the fact that the AIDS crisis really has not gone anywhere for communities of color, and that really the only people we've solved the AIDS crisis for are the ones who have access to healthcare. And that was one of the main takeaways that I have from this book, is that the middle class did a great job of getting rid of the AIDS epidemic and the death toll within the middle class, but generally, overall, we still are kind of failing, and we're still failing a decent portion of the people in America when it comes to the AIDS crisis, and definitely a lot of people abroad. And this also is just like a great testament to how screwed up our healthcare system is here in the United States. But the other cool thing about this book is that you can see a lot of the echoes of this particular movement in the verbiage and the language of the posters and the images that are coming out for the pro-Gaza and pro-Palestinian liberation movement. And so it's really cool to see the through line of activism, and how, especially when we talk about the Palestinian genocide, that the fact that silence does equal death, and your silence is directly contributing to the death of tens of thousands of people. That I think also is extremely important, and you know, that's something that this book does a good job of demonstrating, and how that basically how that works. But yeah, so yes, fantastic book. It's a great also just like look into the time period and what people had to go through. But yeah, I could not recommend this one enough. I think it's an extremely important piece of history, and as far as nonfiction goes, it's extremely well written, and it's very engaging. I found myself it's almost like a page turner. Like there was never a moment where I was like, ugh, when is this chapter going to be over? It was very much I was wanting to continue on throughout the whole thing. So that's always very important in nonfiction, to have it be well written, and it certainly was. So Jack Lowery is a fantastic author, and I am so thrilled that I finally got to this because I loved it so much. So it was Vulgar and it was beautiful. Cool. The other physical book that I finished this week was Michael Tolliver Lives by Armistead Maupin, and this is book 7 in the Tales of the City series. And this definitely takes quite a departure from the original format of Tales of the City, and I had planned on doing like a whole Tales of the City like appreciation review and like video this month, but honestly I have kind of I fell into a little bit of a depression slump, and that's just how it goes, and my productivity for filming and stuff like that just, it didn't peter out, and so it goes. It's how things happen. But I was going to mention how the Tales of the City series was published as a series of chapter by chapter in a newspaper in San Francisco. Serialized is what is called a serialized novel, similar to how Charles Dickens did with all of his novels, as well as Emile Zola in 19th century London and Paris, respectively. So Armistead Maupin did that in the 60s and 70s, and a little bit of the 80s with the Tales of the City novels. I believe it's like the first 4, maybe 5 were published serialized. But then he began publishing them as full novels. And this one centers entirely Michael Tolliver, otherwise known as Mouse. He is the fun, gay socialite from Barbary Lane, 28 Barbary Lane in San Francisco. He is originally from a conservative background. He, of course, had issues coming out to his conservative Christian family, and and he's also aging. He's like 55 in this one, so we've really come a long way with Michael. And I can also see, in a lot of ways, Michael being modeled after Armistead Maupin, and I might be inventing this memory, but I really feel like I have seen an interview with Maupin where he does say that a lot of the aspects of Michael Tolliver's life were very informed by his own experiences. And so this book centers entirely Michael Tolliver. I'm kind of getting off track here, but where the other books would, each chapter you would be following a different perspective of a different character, this is actually a first-person narration of Michael Tolliver himself. And at first, I was a little disappointed because I like jumping between the different characters and I like jumping to the different perspectives, but you ended up getting enough time with all of the other characters that the Tales of the City series is very famous for and like well beloved for. Minus one. I won't say who because spoilers for a couple books back, I think. But anyway, this book is very, very good. It's, for its time, it's extremely progressive when it comes to the way that it talks about and represents trans people. And as far as queer literature goes, the Tales of the City series was one of the first ones to include an expressly trans character. And the way that Maupin has always been very affirming of her identity and her pronouns and everything, is really quite fascinating to see, especially considering that this series started in the 60s. but you also have to kind of view it a little bit through the lens of its time. So this was published in 2013. Some of the things that they say in regards to trans people would not really fly today in real conversation. Like, we just don't say the word tranny anymore. It's just not appropriate anymore. And but they use it in a more affectionate way. It's never used pejoratively in this book, but it's I think in our current lens, the way that we view things, we just would not use that word to describe a trans person. But regardless, one of the cool things in this book was, and I think this is very reflective of Maupin's just view in general. There's a point where Michael Tolliver is talking about how he has a hard time keeping up with all of the like new things, whether it be polyamory or a bunch of the new labels like demisexual, pansexual, all of those things. Michael Tolliver is kind of lamenting about the fact that he just doesn't understand where all of this stuff is coming from, and he feels like he's being left behind a lot. And Anna Madrigal says to him that you don't have to keep up, but you do have to keep open. And I love that little quip. And I think if anything, I'm going to take that away from this book, is just like that little bit, that you don't have to keep up with everything that's going on, but you do have to keep open. Don't immediately just shut something out because it's new and it's scary. And I think that shows a real maturity on Maupin's part, because I do feel like that is reflective of his own view, especially if you look at kind of his history, his upbringing, and then also his involvement in both literary and political scenes. He has definitely changed a lot from the very beginning. Fascinating figure, and I have a lot of respect for him, is what I'll say. So anyway, this is also a devastating book in a lot of ways, but I thoroughly enjoyed it and could not recommend it enough. So the audiobook that I read this month was beyond wonderful. I loved it so much, and that was Small Joys by Elvin James Mensah, which follows the sort of, I guess it's sort of a coming into adulthood of a young gay black man named Harley and his budding friendships with a lovely cast of characters. And this book just kind of was everything to me. It did so many wonderful things. I picked it up really on kind of the recommendation of Simon over at Savage Reads, and I think it might have been his queer book recommendations for Pride or something like that. But anyway, so basically you're following Harley as he's coming to terms with his conservative Christian father, and I think his father is an immigrant from Africa. At least the audiobook narrator made it certainly sound that way. I actually don't remember if that's the case, but anyway, I know from speaking with several friends, and as well as from reading quite a few books from that perspective, that there is quite a unique sense of, or a unique expectation for masculinity within the Black community, and especially the Black community that is more recently immigrated into the I guess just West. This takes place in the UK. But anyway, so Harley is, he has tried to come out to his father multiple times, and his father's just kind of brushed it off, and then until finally his father catches him hugging his, at the time, boyfriend, and then at that point his father really just disowns him. And it's all about Harley kind of figuring out how to accept love and also how to love himself and how to love other people. And he develops this really beautiful friendship with a guy named Muddy. I don't remember what his real name is. It's something like Harvey. It's similar to Harley, but anyway. So his nickname is Muddy. And there's a funny story behind that of how he got the name. But anyway, so his friendship with Muddy is just beautiful. Muddy is a delightful character. He's funny. He is such a wonderful person, and everything that he is for Harley in the book is just wonderful. There's definitely a lot of romantic and sexual tension between the two, at least from Harley to to Muddy, but it's definitely a lot of fun to see how things kind of develop and things blossom. And then there's another character named Finley, who is the sort of token straight white guy in the group. And he is such a delight. And I don't know if I'm going to do the mid-year freakout tag. I'm kind of unsure if I'm going to do that or if just going to do like the best books of the year so far. But anyway, if I were to answer my newest fictional crush prompt answer, it would be Finley. Finley starts off as kind of your pretty stereotypical frat bro, basically. And through his interactions with Harley and Muddy, he blossoms into such a wonderful young man. And I think it's such a fascinating exploration of masculinity in general. But Finley's actual development into a secure masculinity is what I will say, what I will call it, is just such a wonderful transformation to see. And it's I think that Finley in particular is such a good model for what straight men should be. Especially in their interactions with women that they are interested in or women that they're not interested in, and also interactions with gay men. He's just such a fun character as well, and just like, you know, he's clumsy in the way that he treats people in a lot of ways, because for a good portion of his life he didn't know any better. And he stumbles quite a bit, but his thing is like with Michael Tolliver Lives, he doesn't always keep up, but he definitely keeps open, and I just loved watching him grow and develop. And I loved watching Harley go through his sort of trials and tribulations in this book, and just really become a wonderful character by the end of it. The character development and character growth in this book is very tangible for all of the characters that are within it, and the wide cast of characters is delightful. There's also Chelsea and Noria are the other two. Hi, Wally. But yeah, it's just a wonderful book, and I think the reason why I was very intent on picking it up was because Simon at Savage Reads was saying that this is a book that really highlights queer joy, and I certainly am of the same opinion that in queer fiction you oftentimes don't really get a lot of joyful moments. A lot of it is kind of the depressing stuff, or it's either traumatic, depressing, or melodramatic in a lot of ways. Hi, Doug. I don't think Doug has shown up much on the channel, but yeah, this is Doug, and there he goes. That's the older cat. And then we have the kitten somewhere. She's committing crime somewhere. But yeah, so Small Joys was really a big joy to read, and I believe I rated it a 5-star at the end. I also rated it was vulgar and it was beautiful 5 stars on Goodreads. But yeah, anyway, yeah. Oh man, and the audiobook is great. The narrator, he does a great job of narrating all 5 of the main characters, and yeah, just a wonderful book. And it is really well written too. I did wish that I had a physical copy of the book in front of me so that I could kind of follow along and highlight some passages, because there's some really beautiful moments that I would love to kind of return to and relive a little bit, and as well as the way that Mensah has worded some things was really lovely, and some of the relationship, some of the moments between Muddy and Harley were just really lovely to witness, and I think it would be fun to go back and reread them. But anyway, that's also a book I'm for sure going to buy, and for sure a book that I am going to reread at some point, because I was completely captivated by it. That was the book that I listened to on several bike rides, and it just like being outside and listening to the book was just a wonderful experience, and I could not recommend that book enough. I think I will be shouting its praises on the top of my roof for a long time, because it's just so good. So yeah, that was Small Joys by Elvin James Mensah, and I hope that out of any of these books, that's the one that you pick up, because it's just so lovely. So that is basically it. Just to maybe kind of like recap slightly, I also read Arrete, avec, mensonges by Philippe Besson, which translates to Lie with Me. I will also make sure that I include who it's translated by. But yeah, really beautiful kind of coming of age queer story in rural France, in a rural background, kind of price of shame, and the secrets we keep, lies we tell, etc. And then I also read In Tongues by Thomas Grattan, which was through Eric Cervini's Very Gay Book Club, through Alstora, which is a bookshop, an online bookstore that highlights queer authors. And this was a lovely atmospheric novel that did a good job of really evoking what it's like to be in New York City, and it's just weird class dynamic thing going on between a dog walker who becomes a personal assistant to these really wealthy older gay men in the art world. But a beautiful friendship blossoms between Gordon and another one of the characters there. And yeah, I was kind of, I didn't know what to expect with that one, but I was very pleasantly surprised. And then, of course, I finished Blackouts by Justin Torres. This is all about the sort of collage, I guess you could call it kind of the shattered nature of queer history, the fact that we're really kind of picking up fragments from all over the place to kind of assemble a cohesive narrative. And that's basically what this is about. It's a collage of a story. You don't really know what's going on at the beginning, but it definitely rewards you for persevering, and by the end of it, you have a really good idea of what's happening. I mentioned that I don't think that this work is an experimental work. I think that Justin Torres had a very clear idea of what he was going to do. I don't think this is an experiment. I think this is a finished product, and I think that this is just a wonderful, wonderful book. Won the National Book Award, I think, last year, and definitely deserves it. Could not have enjoyed that more. And then I started but did not finish Hours by Philip Williams, and this is sort of a magical realism, historical fiction that also spans generations, and really beautiful playfulness with the language, and just fascinating discussion on freedom and what is freedom, what's the price of freedom, and all of that. So this is what I started for Juneteenth, and I'm going to finish this in July as well. But yeah, those are all of the books that I've read in June, I had a really great reading month. I think this is definitely one of the better Pride months I've spent reading. I thoroughly enjoyed all of those books. Even the little snippet that I read of Hours, it's just such a good book. So yeah, I hope you've had a wonderful Pride month. I hope that you, even if you are not queer, of course, you're welcome here. But I hope that if you did decide to pick up a queer book for this month, it was one that you enjoyed. Definitely let me know what you read down in the comments. If you had other things going on in June and you did not read any queer books, you should still let me know what they were, because I'm quite curious. I always love to know what people are reading. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will be back very soon with, I think, maybe a reading challenge. I'm not sure. I'm kind of challenging myself for something in July, so I might as well challenge you too. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you're new, give the video a like, do all of the things, you know, and I will see you again very soon. Alright, take care. Happy Pride for the last 2 days. Bye.